Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the Mahabharata. Specifically, we are unpacking section 59 to decode its incredibly fascinating meta-narrative. We're essentially acting as literary detectives today, folks, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our very first big clue is a quote that I absolutely love. It's spoken by Saunaka, who is the listener in this text, and he says, "My thirst hath not been appeased by all thou hast said." Wow, just let that sink in for a second. Think about a time you finished a fantastic book, or, binge-watched an amazing series, and when it ended, you just sat there totally craving more, right? That is a deeply universal human desire for a captivating story, and it's perfectly captured right here in antiquity. Saunaka isn't actually physically thirsty. He has this profound, unquenchable thirst for narrative, for history, and for understanding. To really get that thirst, we have to look at the immediate context. Like, what exactly did Saunaka hear right before he asked for more? Well, the text tells us explicitly. He had just listened to an extensive and great history that kicked off from the progeny of a figure named Bhrigu. Now, Saunaka actually states that he has been much gratified. Basically, he loved it. But gratification just wasn't enough to satisfy him completely. Even after hearing this massive, extensive lineage, his appetite for the narrative was entirely unsated. He immediately pivots and asks for another, even greater story.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how clearly it maps out the epic transfer of knowledge. It doesn't just give us a story, it gives us an entire cast of characters specifically for the storytelling process itself. We have three distinct roles mapped out here. First up, Vyasa, the composer, described as a great rishi with an ocean-like mind. He's the originator. Then we have Sauti, the reciter. He's the son of a Sudha, and he is the one physically present speaking the words out loud. And finally, we have Saunaka, the listener, the Brahmana whose unappeased thirst we were just talking about. This brilliant structure proves that in this ancient oral tradition, the listener is literally just as vital a character as the composer or the reciter.
So, we have our characters, but where exactly are they? Well, Saunaka sets the physical scene for us right in his request to Sauti. The setting is described as a long, extending ceremony. We aren't talking about a brief, cozy fireside chat here. This is a monumental, extended event. It really prepares us to understand exactly where and how these epic stories were shared back then. They required vast amounts of time, dedicated spaces, and a captive audience participating in something much, much larger than themselves. Let's look a little closer at the specific context of that recitation. We have illustrious Saudasias assembled at the sacrifice. But here is the truly fascinating part. The recitations occurred in the intervals of their duties. Storytelling here wasn't just some casual pastime. It was a highly structured event woven directly into the fabric of their sacred duties. Imagine a grueling, complex ritual extending over days, maybe even longer. During the necessary pauses, those intervals, the storytelling took over. It nourished their minds while they took a much-needed break from their rigorous ceremonial tasks.
And, during those intervals, there wasn't just one type of story being told. Sauti actually points out a pretty sharp contrast to Saunaka. On the one hand, the Brahmanas spoke of many things founded upon the Vedas. But on the other hand, it's specifically noted that Vyasa recited the wonderful and great history called the Bharata. The text is deliberately comparing these two distinct types of recitations happening during the sacrifice intervals. By doing so, it completely elevates the Bharata. It places it on this unique pedestal as something distinctly wonderful and great, setting it apart from even the most foundational texts they were discussing.
Which brings us to the man who composed that wonderful history in the first place. Read this incredibly powerful phrase with me. Born of the ocean-like mind of the great rishi of soul purified by yoga. Let's just pause on that for a second. Ocean-like mind. The immense reverence the text holds for the original composer, Vyasa, is just palpable. It doesn't just say he was smart or clever, it claims his mental and spiritual vastness was literally like an ocean. Deep, containing multitudes, churning with life and history. And it asserts that this capacity was achieved because his soul was purified by yoga. The text is validating the immense greatness of the story by validating the spiritual perfection of its author. Because of that profound origin, the text gives us a very specific definition of what this epic actually is. According to this excerpt, the Mahabharata is explicitly defined as a sacred history. Its stated purpose, right here in the source material, is spreading the fame of the Pandavas. And, as we've noted, it was originally composed by Krishna Dvaipayana, whom we also know as Vyasa. Now, as an explainer, it's my job to report exactly how the text views itself. And it is absolutely crucial to note that it does not view itself as mere fiction. It lays claim to the status of a sacred history meant to immortalize the fame of its heroes. Let's move to and see how this builds, bringing us to what I like to call the epic's chain of custody. This oral history takes a very clear linear journey. Step 1, it originates in the mind of the composer Vyasa. Step 2, it is duly recited at Janamajaya's request, specifically after the completion of a sacrifice. Step 3, it's passed down through time, arriving at our current moment in the text, where it's requested again by Saunaka from the reciter Sauti. This chain basically proves that the text is acutely aware of its own transmission across generations. It knows exactly where it came from.
But just getting the gist of the story, that is not enough. Look at the demand for a full recitation here. Saunaka uses very specific words like fully and duly when he makes his request to Sauti. He says, "Recite therefore, all those to me fully, and I desire to hear duly." This emphasizes a massive point about the oral tradition. Completeness is absolutely paramount. You don't skip chapters, you don't just give the cliff notes. To truly honor the sacred history and the ocean-like mind of its composer, the listener demands the entire, unedited, comprehensive recitation, the whole shebang. And thankfully for Saunaka, Sauti is more than willing to deliver. Sauti responds, "I shall recite to thee from the beginning. I myself feel a great pleasure in reciting it." I love this because it beautifully illustrates the joy of the telling. Sauti's enthusiastic acceptance perfectly matches the eager thirst of his audience. This isn't a chore for him, it's a profound pleasure. The transmission of this massive epic relies entirely on this mutual enthusiasm. The speaker wants to speak just as badly as the listener wants to listen.
So the crucial point is, it all comes down to one singular number, 1. It all requires one intimate point of connection. To pass down a sacred history, to keep a massive epic alive across centuries, without a printing press, without the internet, it requires exactly one willing speaker and one eager listener in a given moment. The entire survival of the text literally hinges on that singular, focused one-on-one transfer of knowledge that we just unpacked between Sauti and Saunaka. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to consider today. We've just analyzed how an ancient meta-narrative deliberately engineered its own survival through eager listeners and joyful reciters. So if a story can survive through centuries of careful, deliberate recitation, what stories are you passing down today? What histories are you listening to fully and duly? And who exactly are you sharing them with? Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today as we decoded this incredible piece of literary history. Keep asking questions, keep listening, and I'll see you next time.